Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mary Beth Weisberg, Director of Membership and Partnership at the Minneapolis Downtown Council. Before we get started, just a few notes. The program is being recorded and we will post it to our YouTube channel. We'll send a link as soon as that's ready. As we kick off, please feel free to introduce yourselves with your name and company in the chat. If you have a question that you'd like answered by the panelists at the end of the panel discussion, please use the chat function. We'll take the questions and answer as many of them as possible during the program. We have a few other exciting programs coming up, and so if you continue to just look for more information at mplsdowntown.com for further details and registration, or read our newsletters when they come out. We've had a busy past few weeks, and I want to share a few updates. As you know, the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin trial is on its second week of testimony. And we'll continue to send email updates. And if you want to receive those emails, please reach out. We'll put an email address to contact us in the chat. We're also updating our trial page with the latest information and resources, and we'll put that link in the chat as well. We've had a few big announcements for downtown recently. The Dayton's project announced its first large tenant, Ernst & Young, and then Gavin Kaysen will create 2 new restaurants for the new Four Seasons 5-star hotel at RBC Gateway. Several restaurants have also announced plans to reopen. D'Amico and RBC Plaza opened this week. Bar La Grassa in the North Loop will reopen for takeout on April 21st. Snack Bar will reopen on the 28th, and Afro Deli will reopen in the coming weeks. And also Nicolette Diner plans to move into the old Ichiban space, so that'll be a great reuse of that space. And I have to also say that the Twins are back at Target Field with fans in the stands. We're really looking forward to opening day. And also, I should mention that we do have our season tickets for home games, and I have some games available for purchase at our face value. So if you'd like to see that listing, just reach out to me. As we look ahead to continued reanimation, as of April 15th, the Minnesota Department of Health will ease restrictions. Working from home will be strongly recommended for those who can, but not required. Wells Fargo announced this week their plans to return workers back to the office this year. And as of last week, all Minnesotans 16 and over are eligible for the COVID vaccine. As of May 5th, I personally will be fully vaccinated and have a fully vaccinated household. Well, except the cat. So I'm gonna just pop off and hand it over.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jim Voss. And as we get our videos back up, I'll just say thanks to Mary Beth and to the Downtown Council for organizing this event today. Some of you may have been with us. We did this about 18 months ago as we were imagining a conversation that needed to be held downtown. We were experiencing tremendous growth and starting to say, all right, how do we make sure that downtown continues to be this most vibrant place for employers to find employees and for employees to find good employers. And so we were starting to imagine how we would do that intersection. And we surveyed a number of newer downtown entrants. And by far, we had sort of an overwhelmingly positive response with 2 primary concerns. Virtually everybody that had come downtown said, we're worried about public safety and we're worried about parking. You might remember about 90 days after we had that conversation, the world changed a little bit. Today, I think, as we imagine what this reanimated downtown looks like, we might have 3 primary concerns, and one of them is still public safety. And we think, that issue is going to be around for a while. We've always had people downtown who need our help, folks experiencing homelessness, participating in street crime, chronic mentally ill. That population will always be with us, and we need to deal with it. But when there aren't 150 or 200,000 other folks there, they stand out a little more. So we've got that public safety issue we need to work on. No secret, we have a public health crisis, and as Mary Beth was bragging, she's just about vaccinated. I think we're going to see a lot of people in that camp. I'll get my second shot on Thursday this week, so I'm right behind you, Mary Beth. But we have a public health situation that caused, I think, our third, I'll say, enemy right now for downtown, and that is the recession that we're facing. We've lost an enormous number of jobs in this community and in the country at large. And so until we sort of regain that momentum and sort of rebuild our employment base, we've got some challenges that will haunt us for a while. So what I'd like to do today is talk with our four panelists who are all bright and talented. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from, but four completely different perspectives. Mary Beth, did you want to say something?
I missed the introductions.
You did. I was going to jump in, but I'll let you do that.
So speaking now, Jim Voss, who's the commercial real estate strategist at Cresa, who also serves on our executive committee and is the chair of our downtown jobs task force. Jim, thank you for moderating the panel today. And our
pleasure.
Are Bill Baxley, managing director at Gensler, Toby Dayton, CEO at LinkUp, Colleen Moselle, president and COO at Fuel Collective, and Jamie Woell, office managing partner at RSM US LLP. And now I'll go away. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary Beth, and thanks for kind of setting us up. What I think you hit on, Mary Beth, and let me use this to shift to you, Jamie, for the first conversation. We are seeing this reanimation downtown. We're starting to see our way past the end of at least our public health crisis. And you mentioned a couple things that I've been keying on. One was Wells Fargo's announcement that they expect to invite staff back, after Labor Day. And I will say across the Cresa client pool, that's a pretty common perspective right now, that if we can get past the vaccination window here, we can get past summer vacations and kids back in school, life will return to as much of what we used to know as normal as possible. So I think that's an important indicator, and I suspect there will be a lot of others following suit. But I was reminded at the Downtown Council Executive Committee meeting that, we've got Aquatennial coming up in July. So we'll have fireworks and a torchlight parade, and some of those things are happening. So you say opening day is Thursday. The Timberwolves had fans in the stands last night and they won. So maybe not everything is normal, but it's feeling more normal. But Jamie, you guys, when we did this panel 18 months ago, had just reopened your space. You guys had done some major renovations to start thinking about how your employees were working differently. And I wondered now, 18 months later, and as we get through the year we've been through and we look for maybe the year that's ahead, how are your employees starting to think about downtown, coming back to the office? What does the office mean for you and for your staff?
Yeah. Hey, good morning. Thanks, Jim. You raised some really good points there. And so just by way of introduction, RSM, we're a consulting and CPA firm where we have a national footprint, 90 offices spread throughout the country. Here in Minneapolis, we have about 700 people. And what I would say is, we've had a hybrid model to some degree for quite some time. Even before going remote a little over a year ago, we still had, we had 30% of our people that were in essence working remote on a daily basis. So, to some degree, I would say that this maybe accelerated some of the trends that we had been seeing and some of the things that we had been anticipating, but certainly much faster than anything we had anticipated. So a little background on how the last 12 months have been for us and what we anticipate to be going forward is, like every business, we did shut down when the pandemic set in. I remember having discussions with some of our national leaders shortly thereafter, and naively, of course, we thought by Memorial Day we might be back, and then it became 4th of July, and never had anticipated that a year after it started we'd still be talking about this. But what we did is we made our office available to our employees starting back in August, and with no anticipation that people would be coming in, but other than providing another venue for people that we knew that they were struggling balancing their personal and work life, and for some just being away from where they live, whether they live with a lot in the family or living by themselves. Each of those have unique challenges. So we've had what I'd say a smattering of people that have been in the office. And then just as you'd mentioned with Wells Fargo, we are going to be encouraging our people to start to transition to, you might say, a little bit more time in the office with June 1st, with an anticipation that probably right around Labor Day is when we'll probably, what I'd say, move to what our future holds. And so we're not talking at all about, returning to where we were, but in essence, where are we going to? And we really believe that this is going to be an acceleration of this hybrid model. People, I think, will, for the most part, probably spend more time working remote, and that will be when they're doing what I'd say tasks that they can do individually. At the same time, public accounting and consulting is very much a business where you learn how to be an excellent consultant, auditor, tax person by working with others. We recruit primarily out of college, and for a lot of our recruits, this is their first professional position. And so how to act in a professional environment, how do you interact with clients, how do you interact with colleagues? That's tough to do on a remote basis. And to a large degree, my sense is, we've done great in regards to pivoting this last year. At the same time, there's some things that are so ingrained with how we provide our services that we do need to be spending time together. And so you had mentioned about us, in essence, renewing our commitment to downtown, and in essence, we actually increased our footprint. That was with a lease that we had signed a little less than 2 years ago, and we just finished up our renovation of our space. And very simply, it's a combination, of course, of individual space, but a lot more collaborative space. And what we saw was our employees wanting to spend time with each other. When you have 700 people, I hate to say it, but I get embarrassed from time to time where I'll introduce myself to somebody on the elevator and find that they've worked for us for 3 years and didn't even know that before. So we want to increase that interaction. How we do this in a safe manner and what the health protocols will be in the future, that's unknown right now. And so we'll react to that. And I feel like our space is set up to accommodate that in either case.
Can I ask, it was in the paper, I think last week, that Portico Benefit Services, which is an insurance company most people don't know of probably, but was in your building, had a couple floors, and they've announced that they're moving to the suburbs. There's some speculation as to whether or not perceptions of safety were a factor. The folks that I know indicate that they really just wanted to change their kind of work style, and they're making a significant change in the kind of the floor plan and everything. So I don't know that downtown was as much an issue, but I'm wondering, have your employees expressed any concerns about safety as you start to think about inviting them back?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, certainly a year ago, it was entirely about, health safety, especially when you think about public and mass transit, interacting with others. And as time has gone on, what I'd say is that's transitioned, and it was to the point that you made earlier, the physical safety. So we're of the belief that once people get to our office, we can, in essence, have an impact in regards to both their health and physical safety once they're in the building. So how do they get from their place of residence to the building? And one of the things we've done in the interim is we have provided for parking for anybody that wants to access the office, because we realize that public transportation is a challenge right now. The question will be longer term, what does that look like? And the perception of safety, as you know, is as important as what the statistics might bear out. So, I entirely agree with your comments of perception is reality. And, we're going to have to work on that perception, which I really like the idea of some of the things the Downtown Council is doing, as well as other major employers like us, of trying to target a date where we're sort of looking at each other and say, let's really encourage our employees to be downtown, because if they come downtown and, the restaurants are all closed, there's nobody around, and that's our first time back down to the office in a year, they may not want to come the next day. But if they come back and see the vibrancy that has been missing, and seeing that places are open for business, they'll be much more inclined to want to come back the next day.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I've said to people in my office that party's more fun to go to when everybody's there, right? And if you show up and nobody else is there, there isn't the same energy. Colleen, let me turn to you because Fueled Collective is an entity that exists on shared energy. And for folks that don't know Fueled Collective, you might have known them in their former moniker as CoCo. They were a co-working space before co-working was cool, before we had WeWork in town. These guys were doing it. But Colleen, your model took a pretty significant hit just on the public health issue a year ago. How has that collective energy experience contributed to your survival in the last year? And what do you guys see kind of within your market for co-working today?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We saw a pretty significant turnover, especially in our co-working population. So we have different levels of membership. We have individuals and companies that use our shared co-working space. And then we have people who have their own private dedicated space, closed door or open door, depending on what they've chose. And we did see almost 100% turnover in our co-working population. We really didn't retain a ton of people, I think, initially as COVID kind of took root, in March and April of last year, and everybody was staying in their homes. As the flexibility and the ability to go month to month or have shorter term leases. And so people decided to stay home, or they freed up some of their capital with everything being unsure. So but also on the flip side of that is overnight, we went from kind of a smaller niche market supporting smaller businesses and entrepreneurs to a wide open market, because suddenly everybody was working from home and figuring out how remote work was functioning. And as Jamie mentioned with his employees, it's not working from home 100% of the time doesn't work for everybody. And so, we function even if you work for a larger company, it could be your third place. So you have your corporate office, your home office, and maybe you need a third place. And maybe that used to be a coffee shop or a library. And now, with COVID protocols and everything in place, we are an option and becoming more aware. People are becoming more aware of spaces like ours, where we have a fully implemented COVID protocol, and we have sanitized spaces and checklists and all of those things. So, and the other way that people have started to come back and utilize our spaces are companies who are right sizing their square footage. Some of them going from, a 3,000 down to a 300 square foot office, and right sizing and utilizing our space to have a private office, but then also leveraging things that Jamie was talking about, like bringing their team together and having a safe space to do it, but not having to pay for that square footage 100% of the time, and doing offsite meetings or client visits. So there are some things that kind of dropped off and changed our market, but also on the flip side of that, a lot of things that opened up as a result.
You mentioned when we were preparing for this, a company like Cumu that was famously in the paper and essentially shedding 100% of their space. Is that the target audience for you? Are there different targets as you start to kind of rebuild your platform? And when we think about co-working in general, who is the next co-working user for your point of view?
We've definitely seen a shift in inquiries and interest. I think a lot of companies are on different timelines depending on, whether they had lease in their space or, when they're having their employees return to work. So, over the last, I'd say 6 or 8 months, we've engaged with a lot of companies of all different sizes that are evaluating what their strategy is going to be and how much square footage do they actually need. Do they need a closed door office? Do they just need a professional place to receive their mail and meet clients once a month? So as those inquiries have shifted and the market has shifted, it's kind of opened up. And I would say at this point, we're almost now 50-50 larger companies who are trying to right size and figure out what the future of their company and their culture looks like, because that's a component that's very challenging. And Jamie mentioned it as well as, there's components of being able to do things remotely, but there's also culture that companies have worked really hard to create and maintain over the last decade or longer. And that's really challenging to keep in on a fully remote basis. So figuring out at what frequency people can get together. So, our customer segments, we still have a lot of individuals, we still have a lot of smaller companies, but I would say on the flip side, larger companies have become more interested in looking at spaces like ours, where they may have previously outgrown our space and moved on. We're seeing those types of companies re-engage. So, I would say the customer segments have stayed the same, but the percentages of the makeups have shifted, where some of the larger companies have become a larger, at the research stage, a bigger part of our inquiries and our sales funnel.
Yeah. One other quick question. You had mentioned previously that there's a different amenity set or maybe an experience that you're offering. You talked a little bit about millennials wanting dog-friendly workplaces as a result of being home with their puppy for the last year. Are there some of those other trends, either geographic or sort of behavioral shifts, that you see that a co-working model might be solving for folks?
Definitely, yeah. So right now we have 2 locations. We have one downtown in the beautiful Grain Exchange building, and then we have one in Northeast. And we have definitely seen varying shifts in where people are migrating to. We mentioned companies going to the suburbs, and people are staying closer to home right now. I think there's urban cores, not just Minneapolis, but around the country, have struggled to get people to come downtown. So we see people migrating closer to home, staying in those suburban locations, looking for factors like accessibility, parking, that within our industry that people are researching, and see probably 3 articles a week on this is, what are people looking for in their space? And it's light, it's plants, it's cleanliness of space. And then some other amenities like a rooftop patio, and people getting used to being home with their pets, their dogs. And we have a dog friendly space in Northeast. So thinking about the future of that and leaning into the wellness components is a big shift that we're looking into in 2021. We've always had the community-based portions of our membership to try to help expand and connect our community and offer them additional benefits rather than just shared office space. But leaning further into that with wellness programs and, hopefully having health coaches on site and chiropractic care, and trying to integrate all the wellness things that have become even more important to people in the last year.
Thanks for those thoughts. And Toby, I'm going to turn to you next, because I think so folks may not know your business, Toby, and I should let you describe it so I don't mischaracterize it. But when we started this initiative, you were really encouraging us to pay attention to what employees are looking for, and some of the data research that you had both from the employer and the employee side could inform what we imagined downtown could be. And so as Colleen has talked about some of these maybe newer amenities, access to light or dog-friendly spaces, I know that your work now is a little bit more focused on the employer side, but let me ask you to take it away. I know you had a couple slides you wanted to put up, and maybe Dana can get those up. And then Toby, just tell us a little bit about LinkUp and then some of the research you guys have been doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So just as a little bit of background, so LinkUp, we're an employment data and analytics company, and we run a job search engine as well. So we have 2 sides of our business. One is helping employers find candidates for their open positions. And then on the other side, we are indexing job listings directly from company websites. So we go out every night and index about 4 or 5 million jobs every night from 60,000 company websites around the world. And then we use that data and analytics to get a sense of what's happening in the job market from all different kinds of perspectives. And obviously touching on sort of the past year, and we'll walk through probably too many slides. I'll run through them really quickly, but to give people a sense of what we've seen in the labor market, starting at a macro level and then drilling down into downtown Minneapolis. So we'll do kind of a whirlwind tour of what we've seen. It's obviously been a hugely impacted by COVID, and you can sort of see that as we run through the slides. So Dan, if you want to just sort of run through them, and I'll apologize in advance too for I've got about 10-15 slides. I'll run through these really quickly, but if anybody wants any of them or data or is interested in anything we're doing, please feel free to reach out. So again, on the data and analytics side, so we're indexing jobs every day directly from company websites, so that it's accurate real-time information into labor demand, essentially across the entire US economy. So we'll start at kind of a macro level. We have a couple of different indices that we create that give us a sense of what's happening in the labor market nationally. Again, we're indexing jobs globally, so we've got employers all around the world, and we'll focus here on starting at the US. You can see starting about when the pandemic started in March last year, you can see just a massive drop in labor demand across the entire country. Not surprising at all. Labor demand dropped about 30%. We saw an immediate, literally March 16th was just a wholesale drop in labor demand in a day, as companies really were removing jobs off their website. And you can see that continued through April and May. And then a pretty steady recovery since then that has actually accelerated this year, which is really encouraging. So since that time, labor demand has grown about 65%. And again, an accelerating uptick, capped off by the jobs numbers last week in March with almost 1 million new jobs created. So we're starting to see some really significant acceleration in the recovery. One of the other things that we look at on the right is new and removed job listings. So you can see literally our data from January on, and particularly in March, that really steep climb in both new and removed jobs. So new job listings are new jobs that companies are intending to fill. Removed jobs is actually an interesting analytic too, because when a company fills a position, they tend to take it off of their company career portal. So it's an indication of when jobs are actually filled. So that increase in the green and red bars in March is a very significant, and then again, that was predictive. There's a lot of predictive attributes that are data, because a job opening is an intent to fill it with a hire. So we are predicting, or have high correlations in predicting job growth in future periods. And we saw that last month with the jobs numbers that came out on Friday. So then turning into one of the other macro sets of analytics, we've got a partnership with S&P Dow Jones around the S&P 500. So we measure labor demand for all the companies in the S&P 500. And here, looking at it at a sector level, essentially, again, that recovery was pretty broad-based across the entire economy, with materials, interestingly enough, and then communication services sort of leading the recovery in job growth, and other sectors there too. Every sector is, with the exception of energy, is above where it was at the start of 2020. So again, pretty strong recovery across really the entire economy. Looking at a geographic level from on the map, you can see the sort of three cuts at the data. The upper left is the downtick that we saw in really second quarter of last year, just a plummet in labor demand across the entire country. The recovery starting in spring and through last fall, and then again on the right, just looking at 1 month, these were all the job gains that we saw, new job openings in March. So again, broad-based increases in labor demand really across the entire country. And then Minnesota, the job listings went up 28%, so pretty much right on par with the national numbers. Drilling into we'll start with the MSA, the Twin Cities. So this is the entire MSA, and then we'll drill into downtown Minneapolis. But at an MSA level, you can see again that same pattern. Not surprisingly, in the Twin Cities, we had labor demand dropped about 40%, and then has since jumped back up about 84%. And then looking at the top, all occupations in March were up about 13%, and those are just the biggest occupation groups in the Twin Cities. And then again, that same sort of dip, looking at the industries by industry, again, that big uptick in March, driven in large part by essentially the largest 5 or 6 different industries: food, professional, education, retail, healthcare, sort of driving those gains that we saw in March, again, at an MSA level. And then drilling into specifically at the downtown, and here we just compared, just for interesting comparison between Minneapolis and St. Paul. Again, that downtick in about a year and a half, 14 months ago, and then the steady recovery in Minneapolis. Again, labor demand in the downtown core dropped about 50%, and has since back up about 75%, almost right about where it was in February of last year. So almost a complete recovery in labor demand. Again, not necessarily job growth, but labor demand in terms of the number of openings that companies have that they're trying to fill. St. Paul has not fared quite as well. They had a similar dip, about 50% in their labor demand as COVID hit. And then unfortunately, they're only back about 25%. So a little bit more muted in their recovery since then. So it's sort of an interesting comparison. One of the metrics that we track is hiring velocity, so we can see when companies post job openings and how fast they fill those, and so that is an interesting measure that we track. Again, so the metric here is how long those job postings are up on a company's website. So when there's a shorter time, fewer days, it's actually an increase in hiring velocity. So you can see that downward tick for Minneapolis. That dropped from about 60 days at sort of the peak of when COVID hit. Companies were very slow in filling positions, less labor demand. That has since accelerated about 30%. So companies are finding it that they need to be filling and wanting to, and are having success in filling those jobs at a much higher velocity. One of the, we track a whole wide range of analytics around our data. At an occupation level, we map all of the job openings down to the individual job level, industry, sectors, all kinds of different cuts at the data. From an industry standpoint, the biggest ones are and again, this is looking specifically at downtown Minneapolis, so a selected number of zip codes for downtown. Not surprising, I don't think, to anybody. Computers, technology, business and finance, management, healthcare, office, retail, and food service are among the biggest industries that we're seeing there. And again, that's really what drove a lot of the gains that we saw recently in the last month or two. And then same thing on the occupation side there. Again, matching exactly those same broad categories. An interesting thing that we do, we map our data based on those occupations to the BLS wage and salary data. So we don't have wage and salary information at a company level, but we map broadly to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and then normalize that by location and adjust for specific geographies. So this is adjusted that way, and you can see the size of the circle is how many positions there are, and then green is above the mean is 60,000. So the difference between red and green is a $60,000 salary. So everything there in green is above that, and then the shade of that color is essentially the wages that are paid. So some of the highest paid jobs in downtown, actually psychiatrists are number one. And again, this is using BLS data, CEOs, doctors, and sort of healthcare professionals and technology. And then in terms of the numbers of positions that are the big circles sort of in the middle, technology, management, healthcare, nurses, project management, and marketing managers are some of those positions where there are above the mean and a lot of those kinds of openings. And then lastly, looking at just top employers, this is not perfect information. We have, in certain cases, we're at the mercy of how companies post their job openings. So if they don't have a zip code in their job opening, but they just say Minneapolis, we don't have better, more granular information than that. So we're at the mercy of what employers do. So if we don't have a zip code, we just sort of dump them into Minneapolis. So this isn't necessarily we don't have perfect information by employer for downtown, but it's a decent approximation of some of the larger employers there. So Fairview, Wells Fargo, United Healthcare, some retailers, banks. So again, I apologize for running through a whole ton of slides really quickly, but just want to give sort of a cut at some of the data that we're seeing relative to labor demand in Minneapolis.
Toby, two things jump out at me. One, I'm surprised and encouraged by the uptick in demand for labor. That to me is a really healthy predictor of economic recovery. So I laid out the recession anxiety that I have. your data would suggest otherwise. Secondly, I didn't see major shifts yet, maybe in the kind of employees downtown historically has attracted versus what our next iteration might be. And so when we're starting out, you were looking at some of this data and kind of helping us think about what kinds of employers and employees we should be talking to. Do you see shifts there? Do you see specific things that we should, as a downtown council, be targeting either for employers or employees that is maybe unique to our downtown environment?
I would agree with you, Jim. We have not seen it yet. And I would say I don't anticipate that there are going to be major shifts in the types of companies that would either migrate out of the Twin Cities or into Minneapolis. I think in a lot of ways, what we're seeing is where we have, I think, our expectations are more at a sort of more at the speed of recovery, and based on that, where we are definitely seeing a faster V-shaped recovery at a macro level and at a local level here in Twin Cities and in Minneapolis. So I think we're forecasting much more aggressive gains in job growth and recovery from that. So I think, I would agree with everybody has said there. I'm not sure we'll ever get back to what was the case a year and a half ago. I do think there are going to be some permanent shifts in the way people think about work and how many days a week they're in the office and remote work. I think there are going to be very permanent changes from this. But generally speaking, I think as it relates to downtown, I would say things are going to get back to some new normal even faster than a lot of people are expecting to see.
Yeah, encouraging news. And we talked a little bit in our prep session that, we've seen certainly a pretty significant disproportionate impact of this recession on women in the labor pool and minorities. And so as we see downtown recover, I hope that this is an opportunity for all of us to sort of emphasize the diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives that will create a more even playing field downtown and greater participation in our labor pool. So I want to see this uptick as an opportunity as well. Bill, I'm going to turn to you last, and then we'll do some group conversation here. But I know that at Gensler, you guys have been doing a lot of research about the workplace, and where Toby says more of the same in terms of kinds of companies downtown, you would not say more of the same in terms of kinds of workplaces and workspaces. Let me ask you to just share a little bit of Gensler's research. I know you've got a couple slides as well, and just kind of frame for us what your national research says about what we might see locally in terms of changing workplaces.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Great conversation. I think a little bit on Gensler. We're a global design company. So for us, this pandemic's been really interesting because we have a lot of offices both in Asia and in Europe. And so as things were happening there, we're sort of observing and watching. As things are coming back, we're also learning. And so it's been an interesting sort of circular process there for us. And happy to report, most of our Chinese offices specifically are back fully functioning in this new sort of hybrid mode. So it's a constant learning process, and I think we're all iterating really quickly and experimenting more, which I think is a good thing. I've got 4 slides on this, some of the things we've been testing and surveying throughout the process. And I think one of the eye-opening things for us as designers who were really excited about some of the pre-pandemic things that we were bringing to the workplace around open offices, acoustics, lighting. I think most of the surveys that we got said that home is still better. I think it was really eye-opening for us. It was kind of from every metric that we could test, from lighting to access to daylight to having your dog there, your private bathroom, work never came close. So I think, for us, the new normal really has to sort of reconcile that. And I think it's not that we have to make offices home, but how do we hybridize and so we get the best out of both worlds? And I think this issue of choice really is at the forefront. I think every employer is looking at, when forced in this situation, we're all trying to kind of balance our lives and work culture And choice is the way to do that, both operationally as well as the physical environments that we're operating in. Next slide. And I think, again, this won't be surprising to anybody. We're social creatures. The biggest thing that working from home couldn't deliver for us was each other. And I think 74% of people that we surveyed, that's the biggest thing they missed, is just being with their colleagues. A big statistic also is collaborating is harder in this virtual environment. And then staying up to date on what other people are doing is harder from home. So again, not a surprise there, but something foundational. Next. The other thing is, I think we were all into the sort of open office environment. I think the other thing that has come out of this is the real desire to work privately. And I think that's going to have an impact, both, not that we're all going to start building hard-walled offices, but kind of balancing what can the work environment provide us for that private work. I think Jamie mentioned that too. And what does coming together mean? And what are the spaces and environments that we need to support that culture? So next. So again, you can see the ranges there. Right in the middle, 52% of the people really have embraced this hybrid model. And I do think this is going to be with us for a long time. And I think sort of forced into this, we were initially trying to figure out how that works. I think moving forward, I think it's a real opportunity for us to examine what we value when we bring together, what our real estate's needs are, and how we can sort of balance in a way. We talk a lot about work-life balance. I'm not a big subscriber to that. I think there's such an ebb and flow to work that it's the biggest barrier I think that we're going to find is the sort of proximity bias as we move into this hybrid environment, that if I'm not next to that person or I'm not in that environment, I'm not going to get promoted and I'm not going to get noticed. And we're going to really have to work hard against that proximity bias to keep the sort of hybrid model as inclusive as possible. The next ones, Jim, are more on this sort of urban environment. I don't know if we want to jump right into those, or do we want to?
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask you a little bit about how downtown starts to play into this. I have some thoughts and opinions about this expression that we keep hearing, that employees really want to work from home. And I appreciate when you said, that you've got your dog and you've got a private bathroom and better natural light. I appreciate all of that. And yet I hear at least leaders for a lot of our clients saying, we need our people back together. I heard Jamie say that the apprenticeship that happens from people being together is really collective, and the sense that place is as much the people that populate it as it is the architecture around it, I think is one of those things that is interesting to me as we wonder about what's downtown's role in this new hybrid world. How do leaders invite their people back? What's the magnet that brings them back? What's the benefit of being physically together, and how can we do that? So we could go for an hour on that topic, but let you continue with this, because I think the urban question is important.
Yeah, and these are really, I think, to those lines, I think when we have a pandemic, it really sort of exposes some of the shortcomings when we start to silo our urban environments. When we have a CBD that is primarily only work, when there's no work getting done, there's nobody there. And so I think, how do we begin to both hybridize those urban environments so it isn't just single function? I mean, I think for the same reason we all come together in our offices, we come to downtown because we want the activation. We want the collisions of different attitudes and ideas. That's what makes it vital. And so I think hopefully, we're getting more housing downtown. We're sort of beginning to think about how do we blend that. So I've got about 7-9 points here that are really questions. We don't have answers for them yet, but I think I'll just run through these really quickly. And I think sustainability and inclusive and a regenerative urban environment is really important. I mean, this is not about kind of a linear process. What are the sort of circular processes that we can involve ourselves, whether it's living, working, playing in more compact districts are much more vital environments. We also need to embrace our economic and generational diversity. I think the more multi-generational living and working we have in these environments, the better off we are. Again, I think we all understand this intuitively. There's a density and compactness, even in the sort of face of COVID, makes sense. I think we'll continue to attract people to downtown areas because of that sort of collision of ideas and proximity to each other to help build communities. Technology obviously has a huge part of that, how we stay connected with each other, what's going on, how transportation is working, sort of intelligent cities. We're excited about what the future holds there. And respond to changing needs through flexibility in the public and private realms. I think, as I mentioned before, the sort of adaptability of street spaces. I think it's been wonderful to see those streets being co-opted by restaurants to kind of activate those. There's a lot to learn there. I think we learned so much when we had the Super Bowl in town, and the ability, even in the wintertime, to make a sort of incredibly activated and wonderful place to be downtown. If we can just live there and we don't have to escape it when all those activities are done, it's going to get better. Next slide. And I think part of that, both for from our standpoint in every ways, we all have to get more engaged in public policy and urban design. I think that we really can't be sort of passive about this. And this is sort of a shout out to my designer colleagues. We need to get involved. You need to play a role on planning commissions and city councils to get as much thought leadership around these ideas as we can. The reimagining of the central business district, again, I mentioned when it's only work and there's no work being done, it's not a great place to be. And so how do we sort of rethink that in a way to challenge the sort of, we mentioned that earlier, Jim, the typology of the office building to be not just office. And I think, we all want to get outside. We want to be outside close to our workplace. Well, those things can convert to office, to housing, back to office, the sort of flexibility of those buildings. I'm excited about coming out of the pandemic. 20-minute neighborhoods, this idea has been around for a while, but it's really about when people live and can get things within a 20-minute circle, those are vital areas. We've studied this across the world and we understand this, again, intuitively. So our policies and our planning need to support that and not be exclusive about uses. And then lastly, public transportation and technology infrastructure. We talked about this earlier as we grow to understand what driverless cars mean, less fossil fuel dependency. Our infrastructure is going to change. The sort of grid and the sort of formal pattern will exist, but how it will transform itself to support more sort of human activities, I think, is the exciting sort of terrain there for us to explore.
That's all great research. And I think, as you say, I mean, the urban core has a role to play in sort of this shift of society. And Colleen, your spaces, I think, sort of touch on that. I mean, the concept of live, work, play, we've always imagined would be the next thing. Bill, your research is pointing that. But Colleen, I think you were making the point that your fueled collectives or co-work spaces really let people sort of be in a work environment in more bite-sized increments than 7-year leases in the IDF Center. No offense to downtown high-rise space, because that's where I've spent the last 30 years making my living. But Colleen, how are you seeing that sort of bite-sized increment play out? Are you targeting millennials who are living in little one-bedrooms, or are you targeting companies? I just wonder, when we think about live, work, play, do you guys see that co-work model as a unique contributor to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, I mentioned before, your third place might have been a coffee shop or Panera or something like that, that really hasn't become a viable alternative. So we have that place with 1 gigabit speed internet and printing and very ergonomically comfortable chairs so you can be productive and also have that alternate place to meet clients. And so, we've looked at a couple of different things, downtown, talking with residential buildings, both condos and townhomes and apartments, to offer this as an extension of their living situation as an amenity to their dwellers who may not be even aware that we're in walking distance to what they are. So there's definitely opportunity there for education around what a co-working space can bring to the environment and offer people as a way, maybe if they're not ready or their corporate office isn't reopened and they want to come downtown, they can come in for 1 day a month or 3 days a month or 15 days a month, leaning into Bill's research. Everybody's kind of in a different place, different home environment, different situation. And so we offer that flexibility. And where we really didn't see too many members of ours signing leases much longer than a year, we saw that time frame kind of shortened to 6 months for dedicated spaces. And then people are really looking for that month-to-month flexibility on all of their membership types, co-working and otherwise. So people are really looking for that flexibility. And one of the great advantages of a space like ours is, depending on what's going on and or what size the company is at, or how many people want to come in and utilize the space, is that in any given month, up or down, you can size up or size down depending on what your needs are, your space needs are, and utilize the space in different ways and shared conference rooms and those types of things. So it's reimagining your office in a different way rather than having that fully dedicated square footage, utilizing some of those common spaces, but also not having to maintain all of those spaces and having maximum flexibility.
I want to invite our participants, if you have questions, please shoot us in the chat or wherever you can find a Q&A function. Please don't be afraid to raise your hand. Jamie, let me ask you, as the large employer on this panel, I mean, the flexibility that Colleen is talking about, let me frame this with a story. I have a client who moved into one of the co-working spaces. They'd had 5,000 feet, said, we don't need this, we can get by with 8 desks. And the CEO went in every day and he said to the team, come whenever you want. But he realized that there were 100 people on the floor and his employees were out having coffee with everybody else and having a beer with everybody else. And he said, there were some days I couldn't even find my own employees. So I asked everybody to at least wear a shirt with the company logo on it so I knew if they were here. He sensed this loss of corporate identity by going to a co-work space as his only corporate solution. That might be unique to them. But Jamie, I presume that for RSM, that corporate identity is a big part of why you have this space. Am I right on that? I mean,
you're exactly right. And so when we looked at redesigning our space, that identity was a very key component of how we put it together. And so, we've, as I said, we primarily hire out of college. And if you look over the last year, probably 20% of our recent colleagues have never met somebody they work with. And that's not good. But my concern to some degree is they don't know anything other than that. And so exposing them to the energy that comes from being collaborative in person, we need to be very focused on that. And I'd say our newest colleagues may not even know that they're missing that.
Amy, that's such an interesting, because we've, with our companies that we work with worldwide, saying, the culture is so important. How do we sort of define that? They hold on to it like, like it's the last straw. I think what's fascinating is potentially, pre-pandemic, there was a lot of fascination with collaboration hubs. Like we wanted to get different businesses and different companies mashed together. And that sort of collision of ideas made all of us better. We could work out the IP, we could sort of figure it out. And Colleen's model in the true co-working space, I think still represents the very best of that. And so, yeah, we'll have our sort of cultural enclaves, but feel comfortable enough, vulnerable enough to kind of let those employees out there mash up with everybody else in a true co-working area. So when you scale that, that's co-working space, that's downtown, that's city, it's all about activation, and it's all about those coming together in connectivity, right?
Right, right.
Toby, I'm going to ask you a question that may not be fair, but as you look at what is now and potentially a new war for talent, if there's that much job opening and that much hiring activity, a couple of years ago, we were feeling that real pressure in terms of a shortage of labor. Are there things that the downtown environment offers that employers should sort of feature, or do we collectively as employers need to do something? I mean, I'm curious if you have a sense of kind of in this war for talent, how the downtown stacks up.
Well, I think it's actually both. And I would echo what Bill and Jamie said in that it is that there is that collectiveness and a lot of your slides at the end about what makes a downtown vibrant and really attractive really is at a larger community level. That is what, and we hear it from our employees are dying to get back downtown. They really are. They miss, even missing, it was an interesting article, I can't remember where I read it yesterday, about people missing a commute. And people are dying to get back to just give me back all of those things that make downtown as unique and attractive, as appealing as it is. And I think part of that is it's been fascinating to see what has happened over the last year. And as awful as everything has been, it's been a terrifically educational, forced experiment, I think, for everybody. And companies have learned that people can be very productive, in fact, even more productive when they do work remotely, and that there's a need for some of that. And that they don't have to have everybody in the office for 5 days a week. And I think employees have learned too, as great as it is to work from home, there are lots of things that they miss about the office, and the colleagues, and your survey, Bill, points that out perfectly. And I think it is that hybrid model really is gonna be the absolute future. And I think downtown is what is going to make, I think in a lot of ways, that war for talent, Jim, that you talk about, is downtown has got a unique, it's sort of a, it's a very powerful, attractive thing for us, for our kind of, we're a small business, we have less than 50 people, but it is just hugely attractive for people to come to work downtown and be a part of that. And it really is, it's definitely a differentiating aspect of our, and helps us in attracting the kind of people we want. I think that's true, broadly speaking.
Well, I want to thank all of you as panelists. We're right up to our 12 o'clock noon here. One of the things that I hear all of you saying, and I think it's generally true across downtown, there is this collective sense that we all have a role to play in downtown, that we each as employers or as advisors or whatever share this aspiration that downtown continues to be the premier workplace, workspace within our region. We've always held that downtown is a key lens through which kind of the nation sees our region, right? And so if we have a strong and vibrant and safe downtown, we're better as a region. And I think that continues to be true. And so we might be shifting the way we experience or express that, but collectively, I think we all also feel the sense of ownership and opportunity to invest in recreating the downtown that once was, but not just nostalgically, the downtown that could be. And so I know that as the Downtown Council works hard on the reanimation of downtown, you'll start to see more and more stories come out, more messaging around inviting people back, and inviting not just for work, but for dinner or for the Twins game or for the Aquatennial. There are lots of reasons to be in this communal live, work, play experience that is our downtown core. So Bill, Toby, Colleen, Jamie, thank you to the four of you for taking time to both prepare and present today. Mary Beth, are there closing comments that you should make?
I just also wanted to thank everyone, Jim, and especially Colleen, who took time for us during her vacation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. And remind everybody that a recording of the program will be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll send a link as soon as that's available. And that's pretty much it. Be well and stay safe.
Yes, be well, stay safe, go enjoy the sunshine. Happy spring, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody, thanks a lot.
Thanks.